We are born free.
And we will die free.
The time in between, though,
that's complicated.
In that time, governments, institutions, and our egos will limit our ability to find true freedom in this life. These are real stories of real people overcoming the odds, persevering in justice, and unlocking their potential. Welcome to Finding Freedom. Here's your host, John Odermatt.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Finding Freedom right here on the Lions of Liberty Podcast Network, and have a great show lined up for you today with a really interesting guest. Going to be talking about a book about economics and approached in a very interesting way. Really looking forward to getting into the interview, but first, before I do that, as I clear a frog in my throat here. Before I do that, I want to remind all the listeners out there that if you enjoy this show, if you want to hear more of our content, you can join our Lions of Liberty Pride by going to patreon.com/Lions of Liberty or lionsofliberty.locals.com. We have some recurring bonus shows going on right now, a show called Degenerate Gamblers, where we talk about sports and gambling. And we're going to be starting back up about once every 4 to 6 weeks, our bonus show, Secrets, Lies, and Cover-Ups, talking about conspiracies. So if you're into any of that stuff, and if you want some more content, then join the Lions of Liberty Pride. And with that, let's get into today's show with my interview today with Art Carden. Art is an economist. He's an author, and he's written a really fascinating book with one of the best titles that maybe I've heard of a book. It's called Strangers with Candy, and it explores the economics of helping others, and it's a fresh and compelling book that has some interesting insights from Art's experience in life and his expertise as an economist. Art, welcome to Finding Freedom.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you on the show. And I said there during the intro, great title. First question, I didn't tell you this was going to be the first question, but
sure. Where
did the title come from?
So the title came from a kid's birthday party. I was, one of our kids. This is embarrassing, actually. I can't remember if it was one of our kids' birthday parties or not. But I was at a kid birthday party, and I noticed there's a candy all over the table, like the Kit Kat wrapper, the Kit Kats, and various other things. And it occurred to me, like, our parents tell us never take candy from strangers. And here we are taking all this candy from strangers, people we don't know, people we'll never see, people we'll never meet. And we don't think twice about it because we trust the name Kit Kat or the name Snickers or the name Hershey, because all of these things, all these different companies have reputations to uphold. So I thought that's one of the most amazing things about a free society and a free market is it makes it a whole lot easier for us to take candy from strangers. And then I decided that
I was just going to say, and it's not because the FDA was formed, and prior to that time, everyone just died when they ate candy, right? Isn't that
right? Right. Yeah. So the FDA is interesting because that's a lot of people say, well, clearly because of regulation, but there's really not a whole lot of money to be made in killing your paying customers, surprisingly. And it turns out that companies have tended not to do that when they've had strong financial incentives not to. You hear horror stories from time to time, but brand names are very reliable, I think, as transmitters of information about the quality and veracity and integrity of products. FDA regulation, I guess, is kind of nice to have on some margins, but one of the problems that we have with organizations like the FDA is while they do certify good stuff, they also prevent a lot of good stuff and prevent good stuff from coming about as rapidly as it could. So by delaying the introduction of new drugs and new products and things like that, the FDA actually causes lots and lots and lots and lots of damage.
Yeah, no, 100% agree with that. And I just wanted to start with talking about the title of your book because it is such a great title. We'll come back to the book a little later on here in a few minutes. But before we do, just to give the audience some background on yourself. You're an
Mhm.
economist. You're a professor, I
Mhm.
believe. You're also a Christian, and I think
Yep,
you would call yourself a libertarian. If that's a fair
definitely. Yeah.
characterization. So let's start with economist
Mhm.
first. So how did you get started down that path? What kind of drew you into that field?
So when I was in high school, I decided I wanted to be a stockbroker. And then I went to college planning to become a stockbroker. Then I took an introductory economics class and it was amazing. I thought it was just some of the most amazing stuff I'd ever encountered. And I really enjoyed the professor. And I thought this is what I want to do. I want to be an economics professor. And I kind of wavered back and forth between thinking about going on as an economics professor or getting a PhD in finance. I decided after taking introductory macroeconomics that I thought econ is really where it's at for me. I want to be an economist. I want to be an economics professor, and that sort of set me on the path. I went to graduate school at Washington University in St. Louis from 2001 to 2006, and have been in the academy since then. So, yeah, so it started with an inspiring economics professor and some inspiring economics lessons.
So when you were inspired by that economics professor, were
Mhm.
you already starting down the path of, looking into the ideas of liberty, learning about libertarianism, or was that later?
Um, I was already in the sort of conservative, libertarian-ish
Hmm.
kind of area. I didn't become a full-on libertarian, I think, or I didn't embrace being a libertarian, I think, until maybe the next academic year, I think. Um, and even then, it was kind of not particularly well formed. I knew, markets work and freedom is cool, and there's all sorts of stuff that free minds, free markets, free people, to borrow Reason Magazine's slogan, can do. But I didn't fully grasp it or understand it. I still sort of bought into some of the standard stories about market failure and externalities and the need for a government to provide public goods and things like that. But yeah, I was liberty friendly, but became more libertarian as I moved through college.
Hmm. Were you influenced at all by Ron Paul, or who would you say
I was
your
not.
your influences have been along the path?
So my influences along the path, I would say, let's see. So in college, I started reading Mises and Hayek at the recommendation of a
Hmm.
professor. Um, that was, yeah, I didn't know where to start, really. So I just read like one of Mises's essays and a book on our economic ABCs, I think it was. Where things really started to form for me were after I went to the Public Choice Outreach Conference at George Mason University in the year 2000. And I started reading in the public choice tradition. I met James M. Buchanan. I started reading Buchanan's work. I became more familiar with it. I met Gordon Tullock, Brian Kaplan, Robert Higgs, a lot of other people who are sort of broadly associated with free market and libertarian economics. These um, became a lot of my influences. Later, and gosh, I'm realizing now, like I'm old enough that all of this stuff just sort of starts to run together.
Yeah.
Uh, Later, when I was a first-year graduate student, I read Mises's Human Action by printing it off a chapter at a time from the Ludwig von Mises Institute's website.
Nice.
I read Ludwig Lachmann's book, Capital Expectations in the Market Process. And I did all of this kind of in my spare time, or what spare time you have as a first-year graduate student. And I would like to say that I read one book and then I figured out from there I need to read this and this and this and this and this. But it was very messy, very, very
Yeah,
messy.
I think that's the case with most people, and
Mhm.
we evolve in our ideas
Yeah.
as things happen in real life, and current events impact that as well. But so the last part of this, so we talked about becoming an economist and
Mhm.
libertarian, and I'm going to follow this next question up with a I guess a fourth question that'll kind of
Mhm.
bring this all together, which you talk about in your book. But becoming a Christian, because
Yeah.
some people, not a lot of people, maybe some people would think that maybe being an economist and a libertarian wouldn't go together with being a Christian. So when did you become a Christian? Was that something that was from your youth, or was that later in life?
Yeah. So it's actually it's a mundane testimony for kind of people in my tradition. I grew up in Southern Baptist churches, and I asked Jesus into my heart when I was 5 years old, and kind of grew up in the church. Made some mistakes in high school and college, and really started getting serious about my faith again around the age of 20. So summer of 1999 is when I really started turning back toward my faith, and then really started reading scripture the way I should probably when I was in graduate school. So it's been part of my life. It's been part of my life for pretty much as long as I can remember, and I've been a Christian for almost as long as I can remember. But again, it's messy. There were times when I strayed, and times when I didn't. And for about the last, say, just over 20 years, I'd say is kind of when I've gotten the. Again, like I said, I started reading scripture, I think, the way that I should when I was in graduate school.
Well, I can definitely relate to that. Yeah, my journey as a Christian has been messy as well. I consider myself, being a Christian since a very young age. But yes, there were definitely times when I did stray, and I honestly really feel like right now, in the past couple of years now, I'm finally starting to really understand what it all means, and it's starting to come together, and getting consistent with studying the Bible. But so next question here, and you talk about this in your book, but do you think there's a contradiction between being a libertarian and an economist and a Christian? Some people might think, if you're really pro business and you're pro people getting rich, then you can't be a Christian then if you're in favor of that too. So how does that all come together?
Well, if I thought that they were all sort of in tension, then I probably wouldn't have written the book. So, or it would have been a much shorter book. No, I don't think they're in tension at all. And there are a bunch of different ways to approach it. One is, I think, from a Christian perspective, thinking about what it means to be created in the image of God. That means that we are not one another's playthings, or we are not one another's instruments. We are not properly the instruments of other people's will. And what this means for me is that other people do not exist for me. That if I want to compel them to do something, no matter how good I think it will be for them, I'm not respecting the image of God in them. So I think I would be arrogating to myself an authority that I do not properly possess. So being a libertarian, I think, flows from the conviction that the human person is special, that the human person bears the image of God, and that's not to be taken lightly. As an economist, most of the arguments are pretty utilitarian, and utilitarian arguments generally do a lot of the heavy lifting here, because one of the things we spend a lot of time talking about is the law of unintended consequences. And a lot of the things that we do in the name of helping the poor, so to speak, tend actually not to work out that well for them. So rent control, minimum wages, tariffs, there's this gigantic list of policies that we have enacted in the name of helping poor people, or doing justice, loving mercy, and walking humbly with our God, that have had serious negative unintended consequences. So the economist arguments in favor of minimal restrictions, if any, on human liberty, I think are sufficient to refute a lot of well-meaning claims otherwise. Where things get a little bit harder, but where I think there's a lot of really interesting work to be done, and where I think there's a lot of really interesting ideas to chew on, is on what you mentioned, like being a business person, getting really, really rich. Like, to what extent are the kinds of things you need to do to get rich themselves expressions of virtue? This is not to say that, like, if you get rich, it's because you've earned God's favor. Well, no. Okay, I really doubt that. Or if you get rich, it's because you're some sort of hyper virtuous person, or what have you. Again, I'm not so sure about that. But in a commercial society, the way that you earn income, the way that you get people to look after your interests is by looking after others. So there's a famous quote in Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations where he writes that it's not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, and the baker that we expect our dinner, but it is from their attention to their own interests. And this, I think, is profound. It's a profound statement about what it means to interact peacefully and respectfully, I think, with strangers. Because you figure everybody in the world has probably got their own set of problems. I've got kids. Do you have kids?
Yeah, I have a daughter about to turn 8 years old.
Oh, well, fantastic. Congratulations. So Smith's insight is based on maybe it's tragic, but the simple fact that it's almost impossible to love someone else's kids the way that you love your own. Mm-hmm. It's almost impossible to know what is best for someone else's kids. And furthermore, like, you've got your own stuff you've got to deal with. It's extremely presumptuous for someone to stomp into the butcher shop and expect to be fed just because they happen to be hungry. The butcher's got his own kids. He's got a mortgage to pay. He's got all sorts of other concerns he has to deal with. And the best way to enlist the butcher in the service of you feeding your own kids is to help him do that with his own. One of the most interesting things that's reflected in that specific passage in Smith, and I think that it's in fact actually the ethical underpinning of most economic analysis, is the right to say no. So economics is all about exchange, and it's all about gains from trade. And you can't have gains from trade if people aren't free to trade. Mm-hmm. And furthermore, the whole concept really has no meaning if people can't say no to the offers that they're made. So this I think is a profound and a really important insight in Smith that speaks to the intersection between economics and faith in ways that we have probably not taken as seriously as we probably should.
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent point. And what you talked about there, it reminds me of a quick story I'll tell. When we took our daughter to Disney World a couple of years ago, and she'd never been in an Uber before. And we took an Uber from where we were staying to Disney World. And I was explaining to her how it worked. And she goes, "We're going to get in a car with a stranger?"
Right. Yeah.
I guess we are. Yeah. But,
yep.
And I didn't think at the time, and I'm going to explain it. I mean, I'll probably explain it to her like this later tonight, because I think it's a good way to look at it. But when you're getting on a plane with a stranger flying the plane, and the stewardesses who are helping you, they're strangers. And when you go to a restaurant, it's all strangers. So I think you've really struck a chord here with this way of approaching human interaction and economics. I really like that. One thing I do want to touch on before we leave the libertarian economist Christian component of this is libertarianism alone, without the moral backing of Christianity. Mm-hmm. I've come to really understand that it's from my perspective, maybe you disagree, I think it's really lacking. And it could kind of lead down this self-absorbed path of really individuals just looking out for themselves and maybe harming other people. So do you think that really it's almost necessary to have Christianity as a piece of that backing in order to make it so we are looking out for our neighbors when we're doing these consensual trades?
So necessary is a strong word. I don't know if I'd say necessary, but yeah, people tend to be pretty self-absorbed, and frankly, I think that's one thing that attracts some people to libertarianism is they just want to be left alone and they just want to be able to do their own thing. Liberty, I think, is conducive to flourishing, but it's not sufficient for flourishing. So you can bear the image of God badly. And I've done that before. You've done that before. Mm-hmm. Probably everyone who's on the stream has done that before. And you can do that systematically. So liberty Libertarians respect people's right to themselves and to their persons. And I think that part of the implicit theology there is that people have the right to bear the image of God badly if they want to. And I think there are a lot of things that we do pretty regularly that are, again, not conducive to serious human flourishing. There are, of course, there are examples we can all think of. Smoking crack, for example, I've never seen a convincing argument that a crack addiction is part of a flourishing life, and that's easy. Like that's easy to see. But also, I need to lose some weight, so I bear the image of actually in a very literal sense that I'm really not sure I want to admit to, but. Yeah, I bear the image of God badly in that I probably eat too much and I don't move enough. So that I think is in microcosm one of the problems here. Liberty also, I also don't think that liberty per se can provide meaning. Liberty is the institutional framework in which each person can pursue meaning, but I'm not sure that it can be a source of meaning in itself.
I think that hits the nail on the head there. And I think that's really, at least in my libertarian circles, for many different reasons. I think what happened with COVID, with the lockdowns, I think it really shook a lot of people who were just sort of clinging to these ideas of liberty as a as the sole guiding philosophy that it's really not. It's a framework, but it's not everything, and it's not going to give you meaning.
Right.
But anyway, moving on from that, you talk about the book. The book is really easy to read. I haven't read the whole book. I'll admit that up front, but it's a lot of very short chapters, which I like. And I think you said during the introduction that you could read it when you're waiting to buy milk, or you could read the whole book when you're waiting at the DMV. And I'm like, I'm not sure how fast I read, but how long would I be waiting at the DMV for? Maybe 3 hours. I don't know. So it's possible, I suppose.
Yeah.
But one thing you talked about is sort of looking at history, and a lot of people are nostalgic for the past. And if I just, I'm saying, I wish I grew up in the 50s. It was a simpler time. And you point out a lot of different areas where we've, obviously have evolved into a better life. So if you could talk about really what you mean by that, and some of those areas that are just so stark in just being a better way to live.
Yeah, so this is the greatest time to be alive ever, and there's a lot of stuff that happened in history that's kind of neat, but a few moments reflection suggests that nostalgia for the 50s or the 60s or the 70s or the 80s when I grew up would be just horrifically misplaced. I have fond memories of the 80s and 90s in part because I was a kid and didn't really have a whole lot in the way of responsibility, and bad memories tend to fade. If you look statistically, or if you look at the sort of statistical picture about the world then compared to the world now, on every margin, life is way better today than it used to be. Life expectancy is a lot longer. The world we inhabit generally is a lot cleaner. And a lot of people may find that surprising, but generally we're able to have cleaner, nicer houses than we used to. We have access to arts and sciences unlike anything that the world has ever seen. I glanced at the Wall Street Journal the other day and saw that, yesterday and today, I think, and saw that the federal government is going after Google. And I find this kind of tragic in that Google has opened up this huge world of possibilities to people for free. And when I use the word free, it's, part of me, like my inner economist kind of dies a bit inside. There's nothing really
something
free,
I forget who said this, but if something is free, then the consumer is the product, right? So it's our data that's being sold.
Yeah, but how many people knew they had data, before Google and Facebook and everybody came along? To say nothing of the fact that like switching costs are pretty easy. You can go from Google to Bing pretty quickly, pretty easily. Things like Google Scholar, Google Books, these are these are ways that our ancestors could not have imagined that we can interact with the greatest ideas that humanity's ever come up with. Again, pick just about any margin. Life today is way better than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, especially a few hundred years ago. Occasionally, I'll ask students, would you rather live in Florence, Italy at the height of the Renaissance or Florence, Alabama today? And there's sort of like a romantic view, perhaps, that says, oh, Florence, Italy during the Renaissance, you're around all these great people thinking all these great things. But if you're in Florence, Italy at the time of the Renaissance, you're far more likely to be an illiterate peasant begging and starving than to be somebody actually interacting with all these people who are thinking all this great stuff. Meanwhile, if you're in Florence, Alabama in 2022 or 2023 or 2024, you have almost instant and unlimited access, again, to the greatest ideas that humanity has ever produced. You can read, you can write, you can bathe. There's just so many more possibilities today than there really ever were. And I don't know that we appreciate that the way we should.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think we have progressed tremendously, and I agree essentially with everything you're saying here. But there are certain areas where, we have fallen back. If you look at mostly from a health standpoint, in the past 30 to 40 years, you have skyrocketing cancer rates, skyrocketing diabetes, childhood obesity, and there's a lot of different reasons for that. A lot of, for example, to talk about childhood obesity, a lot of what's driven that is just this tremendous acceleration with technology, which I think we're still figuring out how to adjust to. As from a parenting standpoint, from a schooling standpoint, all of that stuff. But definitely agree with that. But I guess the question
think about this for just a second, though. So I would agree. Obesity is a problem. Rising cancer rates and things like that are in part because we're living long enough to get diseases like cancer. And this also illustrates, again, just how truly remarkable the modern world is. That our big health problem is that we have too many calories. Not that we're starving to death, but we have too many calories and too many opportunities to be sedentary. But I agree. That's definitely an issue.
Yeah, too many calories, and I mean we do have these. Not to belabor this, but we've a lot of the major food corporations that are supplying the food, the mass-produced food that people who maybe don't have a lot of money, who might be getting some government assistance, are eating the lowest quality food. So. I don't know. I'm a capitalist. I believe in capitalism, but we get to this line with the marriage between government and business, and as you know, the businesses that end up writing the regulations that give them more leeway and more breaks that help to push down their competitors and things of that nature. But that's just a part of this system of government that we have today that we're dealing with.
Well, there, I think the libertarian message is not that business has corrupted government, because again, one of the things I remind my students is that the fundamental difference between a firm and a state is violence. A state can shoot you. A state can lock you in a cage. Firms can't do that. If you choose not to shop at Walmart, there's nothing they can do about it, really. They can go and try to get their friends in the government to write some legislation, making it harder for Target or whoever else to do business. But sort of at a fundamental level, the business of business is business, so to speak, and the business of government is violence. So I think it's the arrow of corruption goes in the other direction. It's government corrupting commerce, and not vice versa.
I definitely agree with that, but. And to kind of go off track for a minute here, just it popped in my head because I think it is an important discussion, especially where it's going to become forefront, if not this election, the next presidential election, which will be a central bank digital currency. Where you really have, that it's coming. Well, it's coming from the Federal Reserve, which technically is not a part of government. Supposedly, it's a private bank. But yes, it's going to be what are businesses going to do when they're, when they're given that power to turn off and on your money, or to manipulate your what you're able to buy, what you can't buy. And people talked about this when the vaccines came out for COVID-19. If something similar were to happen with the central bank digital currency, and you don't have certain vaccine or whatever, so if you don't qualify on a social credit score, then you're not able to make your purchases at the grocery store. So just quickly, or for however long you want to talk for, what are your thoughts on central bank digital currency?
Yeah, so I don't know enough about it to really have a strong opinion. But you do raise what I think are some valid concerns. If I remember seeing not terribly long ago, what was it? A lot of homes with smart thermostats. I want to say in Colorado. I could just be completely making this up, or just totally botching the story. But there's some sort of energy problem, and all the homes with smart thermostats said, "Okay, now we're set on whatever the temperature is, and you can't change it." So I could see something like that happening with something like a central bank digital currency, where, as you mentioned, your money gets shut off unless you're vaccinated, or your money gets shut off unless you have done this thing or that thing or the other thing. Here, though, I borrow from something I remember Brian Kaplan writing a long time ago. It said a strategy for liberty is to find things governments do very poorly and then do them better. And so governments are really terrible at education, for example. So there are private alternatives, and unfortunately, not as widespread as they probably could be. It's not really clear that the government handles money all that well. So I would like to see more private alternatives there. But yeah, again, you do raise a good point. It's going to be hard to see how it'd be hard to see how to avoid using a central bank digital currency if and when that's what it comes to. And it'll be very hard for a central bank or a government in charge of such a thing to not abuse it.
No, I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. We've had, Ron DeSantis in Florida come out and say that he's not going to allow it in Florida. I'm not even sure if that's even possible.
Yeah.
but it's, of course, in political points.
Right. Yeah.
So something that I wanted to ask you about, with economics, with business, really, transacting between two individuals is a way to make a connection. Ron Paul would often talk about, trading with other countries. If you're trading with a country, you're much less likely to go to war.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that a lot of, these so-called, tech people like, well, I was going to say Elon Musk, but he's kind of come back sort of from the left to more of at least on a business side, to a libertarian standpoint. But a lot of like the leading tech minds, people at Google, they're very left leaning and pro government intervention, pro welfare, all of these things. And I just wonder, with them seeing the power of business being able to raise the standard of living for people, and to bring this technology to people across the world and raise people out of hunger. Why do you think it is that they're so quick to turn back to government for solving problems that they've seen solved through business?
So it's my armchair psychology is they might see the problem solved and not connect the dots to business and commerce specifically. They would probably see where technology has played a huge role, and not really see how it's business and commerce again that are deploying the technologies toward the ends that they want. Again, this is me being an armchair psychologist. A lot of very, very smart people think that they can run the world. And a lot of very, very smart people think that they should run the world. So I think that, for a lot of folks in the Silicon Valley tech left, this is just a manifestation of a certain arrogance or a certain conceit that says, I'm really smart. I can figure out what people should do. Stand back and let me run other people's lives. And I think there's a certain arrogance. I'm not going to say inherent, but a certain arrogance, I think, that comes with having that kind of brain power. It's pretty regular, I think, to look at the dumb things that people are doing and say, well, clearly, if I were in charge, they wouldn't do these things.
Yeah, I think that must be it. And I think it's surprising that more of these types are not attracted into the political realm to run for office and to run for president. And I wish they would, because I think we'll get better ideas in there. But of course, we got Donald Trump. But
right,
we all know that that worked out. But to pivot and to talk a little bit more about your book, some specific areas, and I got to say, I love the you have your book split up into parts. I love the some of the names you have for your parts, very straight and to the point. How strangers help you avoid getting ripped off. Love that. Yeah. And in one of the sections, you talk about really why minimum wage hurts poor people. And speaking to libertarians, I think a lot of libertarians would understand this, obviously. But I'm curious, being a professor and speaking to young people, is this something that you've found you've been able to get that message to resonate with young people, that the minimum wage is actually hurting poor people?
Sometimes I wonder how much of it is that the message is resonating, and how much of it is just that students are worried it's going to be on the test. But yeah, I do find that people find this kind of revelatory, that simply wishing that you were making people better off is not the same thing as actually making people better off. Seeing how people respond to incentives and seeing how changing people's incentives lead to these negative unintended consequences is one of the things that can be revelatory for them, kind of like it was revelatory for me. Where we're going in class on Friday is going to be precisely in that direction. Where there's a lot of stuff I think that's really interesting is in thinking about all of the ways other than wages that firms and workers adjust to changing minimum wage conditions. So there's an article in the New York Times a few years ago. In fact, I can't remember if this is actually in the book or not. That's one of the problems with writing something and having it go through multiple revisions and things like that, is you forget what's still in there. But a few years ago, I saw an article in the New York Times talking about how awful it was that fast food workers in New York City were being fired just like being late once. And I noticed, okay, well, the minimum wage in New York City at the time, I think, was like $13 an hour. And the two, I think, are clearly connected. If you have an oversupply of labor due to the fact that the minimum wage is artificially high and wages cannot go down, then the job has to change on some other margin. And the other margin on which the jobs appear to be changing in this case were things like flexibility, things like scheduling, and things like tolerance for mistakes. Because if you're paying someone $13 an hour and someone doesn't show up, well, there's a whole army of other people out there who would be glad to show up every single time for 13 bucks an hour. So I think this again is another manifestation of the negative unintended consequences of policies that we sometimes make while meaning well.
Yeah, I mean, I when I think of the minimum wage, I really, it's going to be interesting to watch how it plays out with artificial intelligence and robotics, and what's going to happen in these types of low skill fast food type jobs. And I'm just curious to get your opinions on what sort of impact and how quickly you think the artificial intelligence will impact the economy. And is this really something that you think maybe in the next 5 years to 10 years that we could see a massive shift where every single Wendy's, every single McDonald's, and I know you're putting on, I'm asking you to put on your crystal ball hat here, but from an economist perspective, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff that could be automated and that will be automated probably over the next decade. I wouldn't be surprised if the only person working at McDonald's in 5 years is a security guard. Similar sort of story for Starbucks and various other places. The writing is on the wall for relatively low skill jobs that are not just easy to automate, like we've had previously, but where artificial intelligence can handle a lot of what is currently the cognitive burden. Where this gets sticky and where this gets difficult is in being reasonably certain that something else will come along, but not knowing what that something else actually is. I think. Well, so I am not convinced that this time is really different. Yeah, because every time some new technology comes along, everyone says, "Okay, well, this time it's different. This time it's coming for this particular sector of jobs, and then we're all going to be poor." I don't see a reason why AI has to be that. But again, one of the reasons why people hate economists is because we can't be very specific about predicting with precision what the new opportunities are going to be. So one story I tell, or one way I put this from time to time, is like in 1998, nobody would have told me sitting in a classroom as a college sophomore that I would someday need a social media presence, and that there would be a lot of job opportunities for people in social media management. Okay, like, no one had any idea in 1998 what the jobs of tomorrow are, and we have no idea now what the jobs of tomorrow are. I think we can do a really good job. Well, we would do well, I think, to explore. I think we would do well to kind of have faith in ourselves and faith in one another, and also to encourage the people around us to make prudent decisions about the kinds of skills we invest in and the kinds of assets we invest in. There was, again, an article in this morning's Wall Street Journal about a rising tide of homelessness among baby boomers. And in kind of glancing at the article, I obviously, like, my heart goes out to these folks, but also I wonder, like, what decisions were you making 40 years ago that led you to being in your early 70s and having nothing to live on except for your Social Security payments? Like, we've known for decades that Social Security is not going to fully support someone in retirement. We know now that Social Security very well may not be there for us. I read an article like that and I think, what choices do I need to make now? What choices do I need to encourage other people to make now so that they don't end up in a situation like that?
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Like, when you start to look into, the average 401k balance of, somebody from the age of 60 to 75, it's like $80,000, which is totally absurd. No, that's the average. So that's skewed by, some at the very, very low end. But I don't know. I think maybe a part of the boomer generation, it's sort of the trust in institutions is a lot more so than, people probably, I think you and I are around the same age, and people younger than us who I think we understand that Social Security, the government, no one's coming to save us. We're going to have to watch out for ourselves. So we're past the 40-minute mark here, but I do want to ask you just one more question.
Sure.
And then get your plugs after that. But so in this book, we just went through a couple topics very quickly here. Is there anything else about the book or about something else altogether that really you think is something you want to highlight and let my audience know about, or maybe something you want to revisit to reinforce?
So first, I believe the book I believe is still like $4.99 on Kindle, which I think is a pretty good deal. And since this is actually a collection of articles I wrote for the American Institute for Economic Research and various other places for a while, like, I don't get paid anything extra for like new book sales and stuff like that. But part of the book, and I hope this kind of comes through as people read it, is just how amazing and how wonderful the world is when you look at it through the lenses that the economic way of thinking provides. It's truly glorious. I tell my students, for example, that like, I write down an equation for the quantity theory of money, and like, I'm almost moved to worship because it's just so simple and so beautiful, but it is so profound. that I hope is something that comes out in this book and in various other things that I have going on.
Well, that is awesome. Well, that is your gift. Your
you.
gift
I
is
appreciate
understanding these ideas and being able to communicate them in a very easy to understand way. So I appreciate you putting this book
Sure.
together, and just want to give you an opportunity now to give any plugs, mention where people can buy the book again, and maybe your social media if you want to share that.
Yeah, so if you go to strangerswithcandybook.com. Actually, you know what? There's so Doug Stewart from the Libertarian Christian Institute gave me a code to share. Let me see if I can find that.
Doug Stewart, friend of the show. He's been on
Okay.
on Finding Freedom before. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I should have this at hand. I should have made a note of this earlier. Okay, but so here we are. Like, searchable email makes this so super duper easy. Let's see here.
Well, if you just want to send me the code, I
Okay.
can I can add it in and then put it on the show notes page as well.
All right, awesome. I appreciate that. Yeah, so here we are talking about the wonders of technology, and it's something I've forgotten. But yeah, anyway, there is a code. If you go to strangerswithcandybook.com, you can you'll be able to buy it at a discount, and I'll send you that as soon as I find it and remember what it was.
Art, thank you so much for coming on Finding Freedom. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Sure, thank you. Appreciate it. Had a great time.
And you can hang around or you can drop off. I'm just going to do a quick outro here, play the music, and then
All right.
Whatever you need to do.
All
right. That was my interview with Art Carden. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you're going to go and pick up the book. And yeah, so if you enjoyed this show and you want more, like I said at the top of the show, join the Pride. Patreon.com/Lions of Liberty, lionsofliberty.locals.com. And I hope that you've subscribed to the podcast as well. If you're a YouTube subscriber, please don't forget to hit that little bell somewhere up here to make sure that you get notified when we release a new video or if we go live. So with that being said, hopefully everyone has a great week. I'll see you all next week. Always remember to keep your head up and the fires of liberty burning.